everyone, I've come back in time to warn you of something from the future. DC is going to reboot all of its books. Oh, I'm too late. I've missed a couple of years. No, okay. Cheesy, cringy opening aside. Today we're going to talk about Flashpoint. If anyone's in the comic book universe, especially DC side, even the movie side, news has been rumbling a bit. I think you have to be living into a cave to not know what Flashpoint is. But for just like a general sense, in case people have been living under a cave and doesn't know what Flashpoint is, I've brought with me a resident Flash expert himself from the museum. He's like the architect. Al has joined me again.
Hey
How are you,
everyone,
man?
how's it going?
Al, what is Flashpoint?
Well, Flashpoint was an event back in 2011 by Jeff Johns and Andy Kubert, and originally it was just kind of designed as as an Elseworlds story, but everyone of course speculated that it was going to lead to like a crisis event that's going to change the universe, and it did, and it led to the New 52, and then after that, New 52 led to Rebirth, and that's where we're at now, more or less.
Mm-hmm. And this is going to be for like a preface for anyone. This isn't going to be like a review on Flashpoint. There's plenty of people who've talked about that there, and maybe in future we'll do something like that. But this is more to talk about something that's less mentioned around in like the comic space, is how Flashpoint did kind of like, like the tagline everyone does is, the DC universe will never be the same. Your favorite heroes changed forever. This kind of did, not in the sense that Batman and Superman and Barry Allen changed forever, but the fact that we've kind of changed how we see DC, like timeline wise, continuity wise, and even how we like tell stories in DC. The New 52 was very much trying to distance itself from not so much like the past of DC, and the model was that they wanted to do modern retellings and kind of like modernize everything but keep the spirit. They were successful in some aspects, not so successful in others. And then Rebirth was kind of like, let's go back to classic but keep it modern, and that was successful in some aspects and not so successful in others. So I guess just to question Al to kind of get us started on this, do you think that Flashpoint happening was a good or bad thing?
I mean, I think it was a necessary thing because like you kind of needed it because the comics back then were like, people were like becoming disinterested. So you needed an event that was like kind of, cinematic, and Flashpoint's exactly that. Like, no matter like who sees it, people are always going to be drawn to Flashpoint. It might be because of the movie that came out or even the comic, and it's gained a lot of new readers. So I think it was necessary to gain like and attract new readers. And despite what people think of the New 52, whether you think it was good or bad, it gained a lot of new readers, and there's more people reading comics now than, if Flashpoint didn't happen. We don't know how the state of comics would be today. It might be the same as it was in like 2010 or 2011, to where it just kind of stayed in that pre-New 52 era without any change. So I think it was necessary to kind of test how comics would be if you change it. And New 52 is just, I think, just a huge experiment. And, it worked in some aspects, and it worked, in my opinion, and it didn't work in a lot of aspects. But at least they tried, and they know like what they did wrong and what they can do to improve. And I think that's what Rebirth was, at least at the start, because there were a lot of improvements and there were a lot of, positive reactions.
Mm-hmm. And I think I kind of agree with you there. I feel like change is something that is necessary, especially in comics. It's something that a medium needs to, because these characters are so old. They have a lot of inherent. I'm not one who like thinks the silliness is a problem. I actually quite like a lot of the goofier aspects in comics. I think it gives it a lot of charm, and it's a lot of like really fascinating ideas if you like peel back the surface of them. But I do think there are some aspects of Batman being created in the 1930s, and the fact that, of course, that, and especially like every male DC superhero is just white, like, and it's just because of the fact that the time period it was made. The kind of thing, like all their backstories were sort of similar. There's some baggage that comes with that. And then with Crisis, and then you get even like to all the regular versions of Crisis, except for Final Crisis. There are like attempts to try and let's retell these stories with a modern twist. New 52 wasn't really breaking much new ground with that, but the difference here was I think there hadn't been such a radical challenge to the previous era. It was very much, especially with characters like Superman and Wonder Woman, there were like aspects of saying like Batman remained pretty much unchanged, but there were aspects of saying, oh, all that old stuff, that's not good. Let's throw that out. You had a lot of Superman like introduced the era of glowing red-eyed Superman gritting his teeth.
Mhm.
That was pretty much everywhere at the time. Wonder
Yeah, I
Woman
mean,
started
yeah.
using her sword a lot more. Flash decided to act a lot more like Wally West. We had a lot of changes.
Oh yeah. Well, the whole Barry Allen acting like Wally West, that's like a whole another discussion. But yeah, that's one of like, the main parts of the New 52 that, took place.
But with like Barry Allen causing this is kind of like a homage to Crisis, and Barry Allen's always kind of been the guy who causes great change in comics. The Flash was the guy that got the first like major revamp and became like the standard of Silver Age superheroes.
Hmm.
Uh, so with the whole Jay Garrick thing, and then Barry Allen be like the definitive, and then Wally West was the kind of brought in the era of legacy characters taking up a mantle directly rather than just being like a reboot. So it is in his character to spearhead change, but I guess, do you think it was the right move to make Flashpoint, from what has been stated that it wasn't initially meant to be an event? It was meant to just be a personal Flash story that got spiraled into an event. Uh, would you have liked to see what the smaller scale Flashpoint actually would have been?
I mean, I feel if it were a smaller scale, I feel like it would have been more issues if that made sense. Because Flashpoint was only 5 issues. It only took span of like think 3 or 4 months. So they were kind of like, rushing that event. So I kind of wished, it was a personal Flash story and they kind of, branched it out and introduced more characters, maybe like Hunter Zolomon or like, more Flash characters because it kind of went very quickly because you can tell they really wanted that new 52 event to start, so they can sell more comics because it was a huge deal. Because I remember going to my comic store, a lot of people were like, at the door, there were like huge lines. So people were definitely interested. So I kind of, don't know what that would have been like if it was just, a small event that didn't like really affect anything.
Mm-hmm. But like, I guess we do kind of see some of that. Because going back to like its impact, Flashpoint has got to be like the most adapted Flash story we've seen, and it's despite it being so recent.
Yeah. Well, it's like it's that type of story. I mean, it's a good story like from, to adapt. That's why, we have the TV show did it. That's why we have the animated movie. That's why we might get it in a, DCEU film. It's very cinematic, so I cannot kind of understand it from that aspect.
Yeah, and has that very much kind of like Back to the Future feel with it, where you get to see different alternative versions of characters you know and love, which people always like. It's like, it's always something that's good with comics, and I feel like there are a lot of good ideas in Flashpoint, like Thomas Wayne becoming Batman and Martha Wayne becoming the Joker. Those are really interesting ideas.
Exactly. Yeah, that was crazy when I saw that both twists exactly. I remember seeing the last page saying, "Oh, you're really Thomas Wayne," and then there's the whole Martha Wayne being Joker. That's just insane.
And like the Superman who landed in like the city and then was taken in by the government, so then he's like really skinny and doesn't know how to socialize. Like,
Yeah,
it's very dark
exactly.
universe, but it's also like that is still an interesting character you could tell good stories with.
Yeah, exactly. Well, speaking of Thomas Wayne Batman, they still, spoilers for anyone who doesn't know or has been living under a rock, he's, in the mainstream continuity.
Mm-hmm. And not just with like the storyline with the button we got, but like he's like walking around in the main DC universe right now. And I guess I'll ask you that is, how do you feel about Flashpoint not just being a one and done thing like it seemed to be? it seems to be like a thing that they're still going to draw upon and keep bringing in characters from it and like ideas from it and like consequences for Barry Allen and Bruce Wayne.
Well, the button happened like almost 2 years ago, and the end of that story just showed Thomas Wayne running into that light. And I remember speculating with a few people, like Mo or something, saying, "Oh, what if Thomas Wayne returns? What if he's joins the Justice Society?" A lot of speculating because it just seemed like that wasn't the end of that character because they brought him back. I mean, you can count Convergence as like something they introduced Flashpoint in, but they pretty much forgotten that whole thing. So I'm probably not going to count that as canon, but Thomas Wayne Batman is a good character and like it's an interesting character just to, to keep in the main DC universe. And who knows what they're going to do with him because, he's best friends with Bane apparently.
Which seems like such a left field turn for that character who is like Batman mixed with the Punisher.
Exactly. Well, he did tell Bruce, he's like, stop being Batman, and well, he's still Batman, so he's like, what did I tell you, son? You gotta
I'm gonna
listen. You
bend
gotta
you over my
listen.
knee. Yeah, it's an interesting just like situation with like I kind of want to go into like we've still got a little bit here of like, do you think Flashpoint specifically have any of the adaptations surpassed the original comic, or do you think there's still gold in this like idea that the perfect Flashpoint story still hasn't been put to screen?
Well, I think the animated movie is like way better than the original comic because, like I said, the comic's more cinematic, and I felt like the comic was rushed, and the animated movie had time to kind of introduce its own ideas and just kind of make it a little better and make some parts like make more sense. Because I remember in the original comic they had like that twist that Enchantress was like kind of a bad guy, and she's like, "Oh, I'm on no one's side. I'm just here to like fuck shit up." So it was kind of unnecessary, but in the movie they didn't even introduce that. They just kind of did their own thing. It was just a lot better in my opinion. And a lot of people complain about the TV show, saying, "Oh, it's a bad adaptation." But I remember Grant Gustin tweeting saying, "We're doing our own thing. This isn't like going to be like the comic. It's just like we're just using the name and kind of, taking bits and pieces." And but people still were like, "Oh, it's so disrespectful to the source material." But I think the show did its version well for one episode because that's all the time they had.
Mm-hmm. I feel like I kind of just agree with all your points there. It's one of those
So
stories that I feel like the premise is stronger than the story itself. Like the whole idea of Barry Allen goes back in time to save his mother. Like, of course, that's just an immediate emotional connection, and then everything goes wrong. So at the end, he has to make the ultimate sacrifice and like accept her death. Like it's a very interesting thing. The moment you introduce that Barry Allen's mother dies, you then have to answer the question, well, okay, why does he go back in time and change that? So it's like a story that really, after Barry's origin was changed to give that tragedy, you kind of have to have Flashpoint in order to make that make any sense.
hmm
So I think that's
yeah.
why we'll always see Flashpoint as a, not only because it's popular, and it just has got a cool name, like it
Exactly.
fits the character, but I feel like it's just something that to make it, because Barry Allen's origin is probably going to stay like that way forever now. But like I feel like now this story makes that have more weight because it doesn't just make him dark; it also makes him have a more emotional maturity once he learns how to use his powers. And I feel that's why it would make a good choice for a movie, because not only do you get to introduce time travel and have fun playing with that, but then you get to give Barry Allen like an arc which is different than any of the other Flashes.
Yeah, yeah. I think you said it really well.
I guess then to try and, with Rebirth kind of being like the undoing of Flashpoint in certain elements, like you're bringing back the old Wally West, you're bringing in characters from other series like Watchmen. Do you feel like it's a good idea to kind of take away the blame of the New 52 and like everything that changed off Barry Allen's shoulders and give it to Dr. Manhattan like they seem to be doing?
I mean, that's not horrible, but you kind of still have to, have Barry be accountable because the way they described it is like Barry, going back in time kind of opened the window for Dr. Manhattan, to do his tinkering. So you can say it's both their fault, but it's not bad. But Jeff Johns is kind of like, he's a Barry Allen fanboy because I've watched his interviews. He's been a fan of the Flash. Barry Allen specifically, that's his favorite superhero of all time. So you can kind of see like, the bias, which is fine. Like if we all wrote our favorite characters, like we'd all be the same way. But that's generally how it goes when Jeff Johns writes Barry Allen. So I feel like there should be some blame in Barry Allen, but it's pretty interesting that it's being put in Doctor Manhattan as well for Doomsday Clock.
But yeah, Flashpoint is just one of those things that it's something that kind of happened out of nowhere, but it's something that's probably going to get mentioned not only with the Flash, but like with the DC universe forever, like how all the crises have done. I guess just one last closing question is just this is kind of thought of, do you think we'll ever see like in the same way we had Crisis on Infinite Earths and then we had Infinite Crisis and then we had Final Crisis? Do you think we'll see Flashpoint getting played with like that with possible sequels with maybe the other Flashes?
Well, possibly because in the current Flash book, there's a character named Crisis, and he resembles the Anti-Monitor a bit, but I don't think they're the same character. But they're definitely implying that there's some sort of crisis happening, and this character really like dislikes all the Flashes, and he hates the Allen family. So there's definitely something going on with all the Flashes, and it's kind of like a crisis like event. So I think we'll be seeing that like next year or something. So it remains to be seen, but I think there is like a sequel, quote unquote, to Flashpoint and Crisis on Infinite Earths. They're all like connected. So I think we'll be seeing that.
And if anyone has come from the future to warn us about what eventually happens then, when Al has to run so fast around me so that I don't destroy the infinite crisis of the universe, let us know in the comments so I can make sure I can kill him early so he can't thwart my sinister plans. Thank you again for joining me, us, Al. It's been a good discussion and it's something I've never really. You brought up a lot of points which I didn't really think about before, so thank you for that.
Oh, no problem.
So as always, we hope you've enjoyed this, and take it easy, enjoy yourself, and read some good comics.